Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben and with me is...
Max, the
You
wild
You
thing.
throw just the same amount of tantrums as he does.
I hope not. I hope not. That would be unfortunate.
And we watched Where the Wild Things Are. It was a Jim pick, so Jim will be doing the synopsis this week. Jim, your best go.
I wrote this one completely by myself, can I just say? So look, here we go. This is a synopsis of 2009's Spike Jonze's Where the Wild Things Are.
Spike Jonze, but it's important, by the way.
Yeah, it is. It has to be said. We don't always say the director, but it's like, no, here it is. All right, so here we go. 9-year-old Max lives with his mother and older sister in the suburbs. He's an imaginative boy. However, he also shows signs of loneliness and emotional dysregulation. He trashes his sister's room when her friends play too roughly with him outside and she does not intervene. Later, when his mother is playing host to her boyfriend and is unable to play with him, Max throws a wild tantrum and bites her, before running off into the night where he slowly calms down. He finds a small sailboat and heads off into the night, arriving after some time on the shores of a wild and unknown land, where he then meets the childlike but also aggressive creatures known as the Wild Things. Max gets to know the creatures and is made their king, becoming particularly close with the volatile yet friendly Carol, who serves as his guide in this new land. After promising to make things better for the creatures as their king, Max slowly realizes that he is unable to deliver on that promise, and he ends up leaving in his boat, returning to his anxious and waiting mother, who gives him hot soup and chocolate cake. The end.
That is exactly what happens in this movie. 100%. That's what happens that's beat for beat everything that happens in this movie.
It's right? Like that's, you don't...
What? I have a complex opinion of this movie, which should surprise nobody who has seen this movie. It's the first time I've ever seen it. Why did you pick it?
Before I get into that, I want to hear some facts about it, but save
All
it
right,
because...
fair enough. I have some facts. Okay, released 2009, directed, as mentioned, by Spike Jonze. He, being John Malkovich, adaptation, Her is some of his stuff. He, for someone who is really well known within the industry, very choosy and only done a few things in cinema. He's done a ton of like film clips with like Fatboy Slim. He co-invented Jackass. He's done a lot of stuff, but cinema, small. Written by Spike Jonze and David Eggers, starring Max Records as Max, Catherine Keener as Mum, Mark Ruffalo as boyfriend. The most wasted use of Mark Ruffalo in the history of cinema.
Yeah.
Lauren Ambrose as the voice of KW, Chris Cooper as the voice of Douglas, James Gandolfini as the voice of Carol, Catherine O'Hara as Judith's voice, Forrest Whitaker, I did not pick that, I don't know how, as the voice of Ira, Pepita Emmerichs as his sister, Paul Dano as the voice of Alexander, and Michael Berry Jr. as the very few words spoken by the bull. Also do want to mention, we don't usually kind of split stuff this way, but the suit actors, because there were people in the suits of these amazing creature designs for this whole film who wouldn't normally get credit, but I'm going to give them credit. So Vincent Crowley was in Carol's suit, Alex Parkinson was in KW's, John Leary was Douglas's, Sam Longley as Ira, Nick Farnell in Judith's suit, Sam Gersvinovich in Alexander's suit, and Australian actor Angus Sampson in the bull suit. Cinematography, Lance Accord, runtime 101 minutes, and a budget of $100 million. Also with a box office of apparently $100 million. But from what I've read, that is a creative interpretation of that box office.
So,
Ben's the facts.
Controversies or opinions, Ben. Like you texted me more than once and said, I have opinions, I have thoughts, I want to talk.
First of all, I want to hear why you've chosen it, and then I'll explain my conflicting opinions on this movie.
Yeah, look, I had only seen this movie once. It was pretty near to the time of the release. I can't honestly remember if it was in cinemas. It probably was, or if it was, just after it came to home video, if you like. But I remember thinking that I was really, honestly disappointed by it, but it was beautiful to look at. And that was really all I remembered about the film. And then I watched it on this latest rewatch, and I had all these different emotions. I think because I'm at a completely different place in my life than I was when that first came out. I mean, the first thing is I have kids now, and I have young kids. So I actually chose it. And just in the first 15 minutes, I was like, oh, I don't need this in my art.
I have this in life.
So I was looking at it going, it was hitting me in a very real kind of place, and not a place I expected. I didn't choose it remembering some of these things about the film, but nonetheless, there it was. Yes, then when we get to the Land of Wild Things, it was largely what I remembered, which was this fairly messy but beautiful to look at section of the film that takes up most of its runtime. So, but what did you think of the movie?
Look, like you said before, you'd only seen it once, probably when it first came out. I will probably only ever see this movie once. But I've spoken about it in this podcast before, and probably nothing more clearly articulates it than this movie. Cinema is sometimes just art. And this, to a certain extent, is just art. This is a particular vision that has been executed in a way that is very deliberate, very paced, and I think the messiness and everything in there is on purpose. How it feels, how it runs, all that stuff, right? But at a certain point, the art deters from the cinema going experience. And that's what's happened to me watching this film. I was so distracted by the deliberate kind of actions taken in this film that I couldn't enjoy any story being told. I'm a puppet guy. I loved the suits. I loved the scenery. I loved the action. I even loved the metaphor of the wild things and being parts of Max's life that he can't express properly. I loved all that stuff, but I think it just gets detracted on how this film is presented and how this film is written. I mean, this was originally a book, right? And that book had 10 sentences in it. And then they wrote a whole screenplay. Now, that can either go one of two ways, and I think they've tried to keep that kind of the lack of story in this film that came from the book, but how do you do that for 101 minutes? It's a contradiction of a film. It is truly a contradiction of the film. And you talk about weird casting, like Catherine Keener makes sense. She presents a lot motherly figure. She shows in the time she's on screen the conflict that she currently has of trying to eke out her own space while still be there for her son. And, obviously there's a recent separation in their family that has caused a lot of probably what Max is feeling right now. And she's trying to also deal with it her way as an adult and seeking, friendship or companionship of someone her own age. And then you see Mark Ruffalo and you're like, he's going to have a bigger part in this movie. And nope, he has like 2 lines. And the daughter, who kind of is our first point of conflict in the film, is barely represented again. And things kind of get picked up and dropped and picked up and dropped. And I don't know, like not dropped, put down, because it's deliberate. Picked up and put down. It's such I want to watch it again to try and understand it, but I actually don't think there's anything I'm missing. Like, I think I got it. I understand what he's saying and I understand what the story is they're telling. It's just because of the way he's done it, I think it lacks engagement. There would be critics who love this movie, and I mean adore it. But I just think for the average cinema-going audience, it misses something. I don't know, man. I felt like I rambled. But I feel like that's what this movie does.
Yeah, I mean, rambling, and it's a good way to put it. So
I was rumpusing.
You were, yes, it was a wild rumpus of a little review there. But you're right in that you haven't missed anything. Now, interestingly, the last time we talked about an auteur-based, controversial film, we got yelled at because it is the internet. So, and that was, of course, Green Knight. So, look, we may get round 2 of that. But no,
and I'm okay with this because I can defend this one. I understood.
Well, you actually understood Green Knight as well, but it's just that some people on the comments didn't think so. But look, the thing with Where the Wild Things Are, and Spike Jonze has gone out and said it, it's very difficult when the writer-director functionally says it's not one-to-one metaphor. It's not like Carol is Max. It's not like every one of the wild things represents a real person in his real life, that they're doing a one-to-one symbol or one-to-one metaphor. They've said, we made it messy on purpose, which is something that is basically impossible to argue against. When your argument is the symbolism was deliberately not one-to-one, it was deliberately messy, it was deliberately inconsistent because I was more interested in what it felt like, you end up with what is functionally, I guess, a tone poem, but I can't say it very well, but tone poem or
Tone.
mood. Yeah, a tone poem, or a mood piece, if you like, which then is all about feelings and all about emotions, and it doesn't necessarily have the same narrative or story or even character arcs and implications that you would expect in most films. So it gets kind of annoying from a criticism point of view, to be perfectly honest, because you sort of go, well, I guess the answer is it doesn't matter. And the answer is that's what we meant to do, so go away from the filmmaking team.
That's what I was saying. Like, it's a lot like looking at a static piece of art. It's like, what does it make you feel? And I'm like, well,
Yeah,
no, what's it meant to? I'm a bit of a person, unfortunately, who's like, well, what's it meant to say? Like,
yeah.
I kind of want to know so I can connect with that. And I understand. And as I said all throughout it, everything felt very deliberate in this movie, even the mess, even the disorganization. So you can't go, well, they stuffed up, because they didn't. They made the movie. But you're right, it is a tone poem. It's almost like a piece of spoken art where it's kind of that beat poemish, disconnected, connected kind of thing. Like, there would be people who would just jazz out to this. Like, it is jazz.
And look, if I was to talk about, okay, sure, that's the filmmaker's intent, and that's no problem, and they're welcome to make whatever they want if they can get the money to make it, which is exactly what they did here. So, but when I look at it, what do I then react to? I actually react to the first 15 minutes of the movie, because Spike Jonze has repeatedly said he was interested in, creating something that felt like childhood. And that in and of itself is very subjective. Maybe it feels like what his childhood was like. But Max's childhood is very, very specific in the sense that it's not going to feel like a lot of people's childhood. And Max as a character is also kind of an interesting character, which does come back to, well, what are we really trying to say here? For instance, the first 15 minutes of the film, we set up Max, and all we do in that time is basically show that he is having some emotional dysregulation, as I
He is
said, in
disrupted.
he's disrupted. He's got and we don't know what it is, and we don't need to necessarily know, but it's some kind of trauma. It's some sort of neurological issue that is preventing him from interacting with people in, I guess, what you'd call a more measured sort of way. So he's having an issue. We don't know what that issue is, and we are seeing, okay, he's dysregulated. He can't process his emotions in a way that is healthy for even his age as being 9 years old. So therefore, if we're going to spend 15 minutes of the film and the only quote unquote real world portion of the film establishing that then is divorced from his character throughout the entire Wild Things portion of the movie. He is the most grounded, the most regulated character throughout that middle section, which again now defies something like a character arc, right? He can't have an arc because he's actually flipped. We can look at it, and it becomes interesting if you look at it as, well, actually, this is his safe place. So he is the person who is in control and who shows that he is on top of it all. He basically becomes, I guess, the parental character, and then the Wild Things become the children who are acting out, and he's trying to wrangle them. So yes, there's that sort of dynamic at play, which is, I think, what they were going for there. But again, it does just make it kind of annoying to go, okay, we're going to spend 15 minutes setting up character trait X, then we will completely abandon it. And we're abandoning it for a reason. We're abandoning it because he's actually in control now, and that's really how he's going to maybe learn some stuff. But again, it just it just gets real messy real fast, particularly
Like,
when my instincts are character, narrative, arc, story, these sort of fundamental things. They are not Spike Jonze's instincts. I can't judge him by my metrics, yet of course I still want to.
so I don't often take notes during a movie. I did take some notes after this movie. And this movie, the way you're speaking it there, and it's helped me clarify, I'm not a parent, but I have been in industries where I have dealt with a lot of parents and their children. They remind me of the parent who goes, he's just got big emotions. You've just got to let him experience them. And you're like, that's this movie. We've just got to experience the big emotions. And I was looking at it, and you're right, like the metaphors are not one to one. Each monster, each wild thing doesn't represent a person. Sometimes it represents an emotion. Sometimes it represents conflict. So like Carol is like rage, hate of change, and just longing for something that isn't there. KW is like love and attachment. Judith is sarcasm, insecurity, and challenging. Ira is like that chill dude who's just calm and steady and there. Alexander is like the loneliness of not being seen as a little kid. And that was the one I kind of attached to the most, because I think every kid, regardless of if they were actually lonely or not, has felt that, especially when they're in a forest of adults or something like that. The bull, wordless, sadness, the emotions Max can't understand yet, the emotions that he can't articulate yet. And then the owls were like the outsiders that he just doesn't understand, like the boyfriend or whatever like that. So like, it's like a mixture of like people and externalized emotions. And you're right, he's the pillar in the middle in this world. He's the thing it's all flying around, but they're like his external things. And it's kind of like the movie is attempting to show him slowly try to control those emotions, kind of realize he can't. Then he tries to kind of escape the emotion by getting his secret room, and then the emotions chase him. It's like, you can't escape us. And then the moment I really like in this film is the moment where he's just like, you guys need a mom.
Mm.
And it was that moment of him like realizing, I need the outside thing. I need the mom to help me. I need to go back to the mom. And like, we go through a lot of metaphor and like the mini civilization that Carol's built to show that he likes order and the way things are, and the journey to find the owls to show that the KW needs like the outside influence or seeking outside attention. You go through all these things and you're just like, there's a simpler way to tell this story within this world. And I'm not even upset that this isn't a kids movie, because I knew it wasn't going into it. But I know there were a lot of people when this was first released, and I think the studio was very responsible here, because they probably realized the backlash they could have gotten. And they never promoted this as a children's movie. It was always a movie about childhood or about children. And because, yeah, a kid seeing this movie, they'd get scared in parts, but they'd be bored. Yeah, it's just like, I remember I wrote halfway through, is this just a child's hypothermic nightmare? Because he runs off into the snow, right? Like, there's just all these things. Like, look, the movie is ultimately about a child mastering feelings. I just don't think it clearly gets there. I think you kind of have to really work with the film to understand that.
It also, like, Max's behaviors, again, in the first 15 minutes are so extreme that this kind of exercise in imagination, it's a little bit wishful thinking that this is going to,
Change
actually help him process. And look, to be fair, the film doesn't actually say that it will help him process. It is implied through some of his, thoughts about realizations about them needing a mother and the performance at the end, that he has come to appreciate his mother and therefore might change. But it's not stated. They're pretty careful about that, which again, when my instincts run to narrative, character, arc, resolution, really tends to frustrate me, because, and I think a lot of viewers are like that. We're looking for these things and the filmmaker is deliberately not providing them. They're not promising to provide them. And that's the thing. It's like, wow, okay, so we need to judge it on its own terms, not the terms that, we're looking for. But again, that's where you come back to, and we haven't quite talked about this, but it's probably time, I think. That's where you come back to looking at the circumstances around which this production took place.
Yeah.
So You have taken a very popular and well regarded children's picture book that everybody knows, it has global recognition. You have given it $100 million. You have given it a worldwide release and a prestige cast, and you have said it's an art house film. You're following a certain trajectory that entire time until that last beat where you say it's an art house film. This is the kind of film where I just go, was it somehow irresponsible with the property to do this, because regardless of what you say, like, this wasn't quite a Bridge to Terabithia marketing disaster,
It
but
wasn't a marketing disaster. It's just, yeah.
there was still a huge amount of very upset parents and children because of the brand recognition
Yes.
of the book and because of the high profile nature of this production. So even the things that I'm looking for, that narrative, clearer story, character, one-to-one metaphors, right? Why am I looking for them? It's because I tend to expect them at this price point and with this brand recognition, right? My brain, all of our brains have been wired to expect those things at this price point with that brand recognition. So when they're not there, it becomes very hard to actually judge the film on its own terms because of that, the way that we've been wired to actually assess these projects. And again, you actually look at that and go, that's not really the filmmaker's problem. They managed to get $100 million. It's kind of the studio's problem, though, because they should have known better than to actually do this and not expect people to get confused and upset. Like, this is something where you look at it and go, if this film wasn't called Where the Wild Things Are, and if the character designs weren't from that children's book and you kept everything the same and only did it for $20 million, people love this movie. Like, I would probably love this movie. Like, and people would say this is a gem. You got to see it. It's got a 15-year long tail in terms of watching it, but none of those things happened. We spent the money, we used the brand, and we did this, And so that's where it kind of just gets a little bit frustrating.
So the original subject matter, Where the Wild Things Are, as I said, was a picture book, and it was the guy who wrote it was originally just an illustrator, which kind of makes sense when you think of how little wording is in the book. It's all about big pictures and things like that. And as a children's book, having that lack of story allows the imagination, allows them to pour that into the picture. And you're right, in developing this movie, it also took a long time. It went through a lot of pairs of hands. There was one of the studios, I forget who it was, after Spike Jonze started developing it, was like, wait, this isn't the movie we wanted. And ended up kind of selling it or reverting it back to Warner Brothers or whoever ended up distributing it. I can't quite remember. So yeah, like, there are even studios who were like, wait, this isn't exactly what we wanted. We wanted a kids movie banger, is I'm sure what they started off as, right? But the author, his name is Maurice Sendak, he was kind of really there throughout the process, especially when it came to design and that sort of stuff. And I think he really loved Spike Jonze's vision. He really loved the artistic take on it. And it was just this kind of, yeah, you're right. Like, what studio now, especially with the hindsight of this movie, would ever put this much money into an art house picture again? Like, normally that's reserved for someone who's putting their own money in or has got private backers, and it's a director who's creating a passion project, like, well, Megaropolis kind of comes to mind recently. It is such an odd feeling film from the outside and the inside. I got a bit of trivia for you. So, it was originally a 10-sentence book, 338 words. It became a 111-page script that also got a movie novelization of 288-page novel. Is that like the most expanded story from its original to ending of all time?
Yeah, I mean,
That's why a movie novelization. That's wild to me.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, put all that together and look at it for what it is. Did I like it? Not really. Like, honestly, I'm just not really. Like I like parts of it very much. I like a lot of the aesthetic. I think it looks beautiful. I think it's frightening in parts in a way that's also really beautiful. And I do appreciate certain sections of it. There are sections, where KW is putting him in her mouth that are just, I mean, look, it's creepy and weird, but it's also a really heartfelt moment at the same time. And there's a lot going on there in terms of looking at her as protecting him, but also he's very vulnerable. Like, there's just, and moment to moment, there's heaps of this stuff that you could look at and you could appreciate. And I feel like I do, but at the same time, when you look at it overall as a package, that sounds awfully corporate, but, whatever, as a package, do I actually like it? No, I don't really like it. And I think that's important for me just to be honest and articulate.
Yeah, look, I agree. I'm not a fan of the film, but you're right. There are parts of this film that are almost masterful. And
Mm,
I think KW is actually one of those parts as a whole. She's the character that shows the most kind of empathy, the most kind of even understanding of the situation. Like, it is heavily implied in this movie that they've eaten the last couple of kings.
yeah.
Like, heavily implied that it didn't go well, and that each time they're looking for something new to make things better, and they always crown a king and all that sort of stuff. But like, you're right, as a package this doesn't work. But if I went to an exhibition at an art gallery and each room was a part of this film that you could view as its own wedge, like them running across the desert, them exploring the diorama, the wild rumpus, some of the beach scenes, the dirt clod fight, you watch every one of those in a short burst that you could repeat. And I actually think that's a more stimulating experience. That would itch something in my brain that is separate from a movie going experience that I would enjoy. Because it's almost like, look at these interpretations of parts of these books and made into cinema exhibitions.
Yeah, actually, can you imagine, like, just to riff on that, like you walk into like rooms where, yes, you've got the screen with the one section playing, and then you've got walls of concept art, and you've got then maybe like the same sequence, but like with an animated kind of filter over the top, and like the whole thing's just bombarding you and coming at you, like,
And
and
you
then
could
you've
do
got,
noise from different directions and
yeah,
ambient noise. Like, there's a place for this. I just
yeah,
don't think it's as a consecutively shot film.
yeah.
There is beauty, there is art, there is vision,
There's meaning too, like there
there's
is
room for
meaning.
interpretation,
Yeah.
which is all part of fantastic art. Unfortunately, it's been stitched together in a film. The last thing I want to say, and I didn't realize this before the film, but I'd seen that trailer 100 times. Song's not in the movie.
I
Like,
didn't watch the trailer, so well, I don't know what
there's
song.
an Arcade Fire song, and I had to look this up because I'm not a band person, I'm not a music person, called Wake Up, that they re-recorded as like an acoustic-y version just for the trailer, and it's really good. It's better than the real version, in my opinion, but it's not in the movie, and you cannot get that version anywhere except the trailer.
Wow. Okay.
So, like, have a look at it after the film. Like, it's I can't sing, but it's like that kind of
Okay.
chorusy song bit from Arcade Fire that they do. It's really interesting. And I'm like, all throughout the movie, I'm like, I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for it because it's going to be this moment of like they're walking along or whatever. And then, like, never happens. And then I went back and I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
sure that thing is in the trailer. And I went to the trailer. I'm like, there it is. There it is. But yeah. So, yeah, that was kind of like, it was like a bit frustrating because I thought it's such an evocative piece of music for that trailer. And I'm like, oh, that'd be great in the film. But no, not in the film. I also want to talk about, we mentioned it briefly, budget versus earnings. Normally, when I talk how much a movie made, we're talking American domestic or US domestic. That's a difficult figure to, not difficult, but it's a figure they don't promote too much for this movie. They promote the worldwide figure almost exclusively, and that's the 100 million. But we've also spoken before, I think what the general rule of thumb is, based on budget, you spend 50% again, or double it, 50% again on marketing, right?
At least.
At
Yep.
least. So, I mean, that's probably what this, I mean, I remember actually seeing this film everywhere, to be honest. So it maybe got a little bit more, but you didn't have to ship actors out for interviews and all that sort of stuff. So that made it cheapen things up a little bit. This movie didn't make its money. And I don't think Spike Jonze cares. I don't think a lot of people who are involved in making this film cares. A studio cares. It's just an interesting thing. Like, there are movies we have done that it not making its money has really mattered. But this, it just doesn't, I don't think it matters at all to this film. And I think that's just an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, it again is particularly in that marketplace, the 2009 marketplace, like to spend 100 million and then not get a return is would usually be seen as a failure. But then when you look at what this film was, I mean, expecting a return was maybe madness. What we were actually looking at here, which again makes the whole thing just kind of baffling. Like, and look, Warner Brothers as a studio kind of does have a history of taking these big swings around this time. And it was stuff that people were like, that's not gonna work. Like they were very much in the Snyder camp around this point in time too. We were seeing things like Snyder's Watchmen, seeing things like Sucker Punch, huge budgets and unlikely to make a return. Yeah. So whoever was in charge of Warner Brothers at this time
was having a fun time.
Was having a fun time. So truth be told, we got some interesting stuff that we would never get at this price point at any other point in history. But yes, it was a little different.
I'm glad this movie was made, by the way. Excuse me. By the way, I think there are people who it genuinely serves, and I think there are people who will genuinely enjoy it. And if you haven't seen it, and you are someone who enjoys movies and cinema, watch it, make your own mind up, because, obviously Jim and I have said we don't enjoy the film, but we've also pointed out the bits that we think are good and clever, and make up your own mind on this one. It's definitely a movie to make up your own mind on. There are definitely people in my life where I would go, hey, watch this movie, and there are definitely people I'd say, do not watch this movie.
Yeah.
And that's based on me knowing them. So I actually want to say thank you for getting us to watch this film, because it has expanded my cinema knowledge and my cinema palette, I think. And it has shown me things I like and don't like in a way that I think is informative and was enjoyable through the process. But yeah, wow, not watching it again.
Yeah, look, because I'm me, I will watch it again, but it'll be a few years, it'll be a few years.
You're going to watch it to break it down again or see what your view has changed on it. You're not watching it because you think, I'm going to enjoy this.
No, that's true. I didn't really enjoy it the first time. I didn't really enjoy it this time. And again, I want to be really clear because people tend to take these things to heart. If someone didn't like something, like, you didn't get it, you're an awful human being.
Subtext is hard.
Is it? I don't know.
Some people think it is, and some people think we don't get it.
It's true, but that's okay. They're allowed to think that too. Look, I'm glad we watched it. I'm glad you watched it, and I'm glad I made you watch it. So why don't you tell the good people of the interwebs where they can find us? And I want to see what you have got for us next, because I don't know where you go from this one.
Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. I said it at the start of the podcast. I'm saying it right now. Those words help you find us on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. Once you do find us there, subscribe, follow. Once you've subscribed and followed, here's the next step. I'm providing structure, unlike this film. The next step is that you like the video or the podcast. And the last step, and here's the crucial one, tell us why we're wrong about this movie in the comments.
Be
polite. Be constructive. Tell us why you loved it. Because you're allowed to love this movie. You really are. You're allowed to have passion for it. Tell us. But don't use things like, I didn't get the subtext, or they just don't get it. Because that's not a constructive argument. Use things like, I love the imagery. I love the acting. I think the story, it connects to me. That's what we want to hear. You can also do those sort of things on the social medias. TikTok, Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. And Instagram, Jim_and_Ben. I'm not antagonizing you. I'm engaging you, audience.
I don't know, man. It sounds like you're antagonizing people. Like, you get so intense when you're like, comment
now.
I'm like, yeah.
If you comment within the first half hour of this video going up, I will comment back an equal length comment. That's the challenge you've got. You could do something huge.
That's not really a cool thing to have.
You're not a cool thing.
Just saying.
I'm going to
You
wild
get,
rumpus my room in a second.
you get so weird with this like, share, subscribe bump. Like it turns into like this insane intensity and I don't know what's happening. Like what's wrong with just saying,
Well,
hey, we're on Instagram, guys.
as an antidote to this film, I have 4 films that are all beautifully structured and all classics. I'm going to let you choose. You can choose 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now, there is a warning here. A couple of these movies are long, as classics back in the day tended to be. So, as an antidote to this, Jim, I'm going to let you choose 1, 2, 3, or 4.
I choose peace. 2.
We are watching Seven Samurai.
Okay.
An absolute classic of a genre, an absolute inspirational piece. Many directors and creators have cited, I'm going to try and say his name, Akira Kurosawa as a kind of linchpin of their inspiration, as someone who defined, cinema and classics, and especially being a foreign film to come and kind of influence Hollywood. It's really impressive stuff. I have only ever seen parts of it. I have not seen the whole film. And so next week we will be watching Seven Samurai.
Well, thanks. Look forward to it. Bye-bye.